Being that yesterday was Halloween, you might have noticed the obligatory superhero or the occasional witch.
Trick or treat!
But did you perhaps encounter a zombie? Zombies, the walking dead, have their roots in Haitian voodoo. Lore has it that the very first zombies were brought back to life through black magic, usually as an unwilling slave to serve a sinister master.
We don't know how far back the legend of the voodoo zombie goes. It is hundreds of years, it could be thousands of years. It comes from an oral tradition. We know that the roots come from the Caribbean, which can trace their roots back to West Africa.
Mel Brooks's son, Max Brooks, is something of a zombie zealot. He's written 2 books on a subject he finds downright lively.
There are many subgenres of undead. There are voodoo zombies. There are flesh-eating zombies. There are dancing zombies. There are running zombies. There are talking zombies. Zombies keep mutating.
Just how the zombie was transformed from this into this is pretty much due to one man.
George Romero.
George Romero, Night of the Living Dead.
George Romero is a hero of mine.
George Romero was an independent filmmaker out of Pittsburgh who came up with the idea that zombies could also be cannibals and introduced this whole apocalypse, doomsday scenario.
David Edelstein is our Sunday morning film critic.
Zombies are a kind of blank slate. You can project almost anything you want to.
What are they doing? Why do they come here?
Some kind of instinct. This was an important place in their lives.
You can make a left-wing movie, a sort of anti-capitalist movie like Dawn of the Dead, in which they become the ultimate mindless consumers. You can make a right-wing movie where they stand for the communist threat.
You fools, you're in danger!
The invasion of the Red Menace and the elimination of all individualism.
Our wives, our children, everyone! They're here already! You're next! You're next!
In fact, what with recent box office hits, blockbuster video games, and dozens of comic books, zombies are experiencing something of a revival. They're even showing up in zombified classic books from the 19th century. Zombies are cropping up almost daily.
What do we want? When do we want them? Now!
These aficionados are on what's called a zombie crawl, hitting the streets of New York City's Halloween Central, Greenwich Village, paying homage to zombies the world over, raising a glass to their favorite ghoul. To zombie authorities like Max Brooks, our current fascination with these supernatural creatures may come from a very human emotion.
I think right now zombies are popular because they play on our very real anxieties of the world around us. We're living in a time of extreme anxiety and global anxiety. You can't shoot H1N1 in the head. You can do that with a zombie.
Small wonder that in the world of the supernatural these days, zombies are super popular. But be forewarned.
The biggest tip I can give someone is if you're going to write a zombie book or come out as a zombie fan, get a girlfriend first.
It's a question we have all pondered. When it's over, is it really over? Is there life after death? And if there is, just what's it like? Is death followed by heaven or hell, as Michelangelo imagined? Do we become ghostly presences like those Shakespeare conjured?
I am thy father's spirit.
Or was Plato right? The body dies, but the soul lives on forever. Or is death more like this?
How do I explain these extraordinary encounters with the dead?
It's called a coincidence, and you've been dining off it for years, you fake.
A made-for-TV afterlife where handsome men chit-chat with beautiful women.
How come you're the only one who can see me?
Been asking myself that question for years.
I do believe in the afterlife. It's a wonderful afterlife.
So nothing about the afterlife scares you?
No, I think it's much easier. Waitressing scares me.
Psychic Barbara Reeder says she communicates with the dead all the time.
Many times they want their loved ones to know that they're okay, and they want their loved ones to know that there's something else, that they live on, they haven't died. O Adonai Elohim, Tetragrammaton, Allah.
Through prayer and meditation, Reeder says she works with an angel who connects her with the unseen world. Believe what you will, Reeder says her proof is a budding business.
So you see things in your mind?
Sometimes it's like, do you remember that show Laugh In?
Yeah.
Where you'd walk in, there'd be an Indian and a minister and, like, you know, coaches and all these different people. Sometimes it's like that when I look at someone, because I see the aura and I see the guides and the spirits around them in the aura. If you can, try not to cross your hands over your solar plexus while we're doing the reading.
It all sounds pretty out there, but could her claims stand up in a reading for this correspondent?
There are beings on the other side that help you with your work and help you in your life.
More about that later. While it may seem fringe today, at the turn of the last century, seeing the dead was a popular pastime. Pierre Apraxine is curator of The Perfect Medium, an exhibit at New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art.
So these are photographs, in some cases, of what people believe to be ghosts.
Right.
Spirits?
Right.
They're called, what else? Spirit photographs. They date back to the Civil War, when grieving Americans believed new technology could capture one last glimpse of them with their departed loved one.
If you think about the microscope already, that you can see, or with the telescope, that you can see much further, or the infinitely small, so why not the invisible?
The images flourished, along with the popularity of spiritualism, the belief that the living could communicate with those who didn't exactly die, but crossed over. First Lady Mary Todd Lincoln was a believer, and after her husband's assassination, sat for her own spirit photograph.
You see there is a silhouette on top.
Yes.
There is a woman.
It's a woman holding out her finger and saying, "Put your shoes away."
Very often the ghosts have this kind of imperious gestures. They seem to command somehow.
In time, most spirit photographs were revealed as fakes, but even after one famous photographer facing charges of fraud admitted to fakery in court.
Nevertheless, people in the audience continue to believe, and the rationale was, well, yes, he faked most of the images, but in my case, he was right.
Oh, man.
Virtually all societies and cultures from the beginning of time have had some notion of the afterlife.
Well, it must be the greatest mystery you would expect, because we aren't any further at solving it than we were when we were cavemen.
For Alan Siegel, professor of religion at Barnard College, the real question isn't finding the answer.
The question is how to quest for it. What are the right questions to pursue? Do we have similar ways of envisioning our afterlife? Do they have similar functions? And the answer to that, I think, is yes. We have very similar notions from culture to culture of what's going to happen to us. And they do the same things. They help us organize what we should be, what we want to be, and they help us to express what we think are the most important things about ourselves.
But, says Siegel, most of us don't really think about the afterlife until a certain age.
It's more important how to set up a household, how to develop a career, how to raise children. But after those questions are resolved and people get older, even in the United States, we return to the more basic questions of what is my existence for? Does my life have meaning? And that's when we begin to think about notions of life after death.
So, in the year 2005, where do Americans stand on the notion of life after death? Spirits or ghosts? According to a new CBS News poll, 45% of Americans do not believe in ghosts, but even more of us, 48%, do. When asked whether they've ever seen or felt the presence of a ghost, more than 1 in 5 Americans, 22%, say yes. And what about the afterlife? Is the end the end? 14% say yes, but 78% of Americans believe indeed there is life after death. Presumably not the afterlife Reverend G. Vale Owen reported seeing in February of 1923, a vision of heaven where sailing was a popular pastime. Dispatches from the beyond can seem far-fetched, which brings us back to psychic Barbara Reeder.
There are 2 grandmothers with you. One grandfather feels like he's still resting, and there's a woman that feels like she is on your husband's side.
Is it possible she's really communing with my dearly departed? While some of her comments were not quite on the mark.
Now, you have 2 now, right?
Yes.
Girl and a boy?
Girl or girl.
40 things really changed for him. Is that when you got married?
He was 30.
Okay.
Some rang eerily true.
All right. Your grandfather wants you to check the transmission in your husband's car. Is it an old car?
No, but it has the service light is on.
Okay. Sorry. Mamu, is that what you called your grandmother?
Moan.
Okay, because it's a big M. There should be this large M around her. And this incredible...
Does anyone really know?
Nobody really knows, but many people believe that they know.
Writer Mary Roach has traveled the sometimes inspired, sometimes zany terrain of the great beyond in her new book, Spook. Science tackles the afterlife. There's a lot of amusing anecdotes in the book.
Sure.
What topped the list for you?
There was this guy, Thomas Lynn Bradford, who decided he wanted to prove there was, this place, Summerland, this beyond. And so he got together with this woman named Ruth, and they figured out, okay, the only way to do this is to get 2 minds perfectly attuned. One of them must shed its earthly mantle, meaning die. Then he was going to communicate to Ruth that, yes, I'm here, and here's what's here.
Bradford's efforts made front-page news. Unfortunately, we'll never know if he actually got through to Ruth. So how has science tackled this question?
When you're talking about really getting an answer, pinning down some sort of proof, some of the near-death experience work that's going on right now is very intriguing.
But claims of near-death experiences remain just that, claims. Do you think science will ever be able to prove or disprove that there is life after death?
I'm not sure we want them to.
Oh.
It's possibly nice to have some mystery to it and to leave it open to one's beliefs. If we say prove that that lights out, that's it. How sad to take that away from people. So I don't even know, Although I personally still want to know.
Do you really want to know?
Only if the answer's yes.
Nothing puts the treat in Trick or Treat like candy corn, a Halloween staple. Turns out these orange, yellow, and white triangles are a uniquely American candy, dating back to the 1880s. Back then, they were manufactured by the Wonderly Candy Company in Philadelphia. Today, most candy corn comes to us from Brock's and Jelly Belly, which once was known as the Golitz Company.
Jelly Belly Candy Company has been making candy corn, we believe, since 1898. This is my great-grandfather, Gustav.
Bill Kelly is vice chairman of Jelly Belly and a fourth-generation candy maker.
We make people happy, we bring enjoyment to children and adults, and it's fun.
The process of making candy corn was actually pretty revolutionary in its day. The tricolor effect required 3 separate passes, depositing just the right amount of candy each time around. Over the years, machines have been replacing candy men, but little else has changed, including the recipe.
It's basically sugar corn syrup. It has a whipping agent in it, normally made with gelatin, and that's basically it, color and flavor.
As for the shape of candy corn, it's a safe guess that in a young nation that made its living on the farm, the corn kernel shape was only logical.
People ask me, why is candy corn the way it is? And I always say, well, if you line them up in your hand, it looks just like corn on the cob.
And even though most of us think trick or treat when we see candy corn, there's the pink variety for Valentine's Day, pastel for Easter, and even red, white, and green candy corn for Christmas. But perhaps nothing says fall or Halloween better than this sugary harvest of triangles. Yellow and orange and white.
Through many a year, his fame has grown like midnight fast.
In the corner of a small Baltimore cemetery, the wreath-bearing guests gathered round his grave the first Sunday of this month to commemorate
the 151st anniversary of the death of Edgar Allan Poe.
Edgar Allan Poe invented the detective story, but the author of Murders in the Rue Morgue and The Mystery of Marie Roget himself died an abrupt and bizarre death that has confounded historians. They know when he died.
And the fever called living is conquered at last.
What they can't tell you is how.
Nobody's really given us the answer to Poe's death. It's a mystery.
The actor John Astin plays Poe in the one-man show Once Upon a Midnight.
Dying! At the time of his death, there were a half a dozen theories from the physicians who attended him. Nobody knew. It was brain fever or alcoholism or exposure.
Even Poe's exact movements were murky. Just prior to his death, he vanished for more than 5 days before he turned up drunk and delirious in a Baltimore bar.
What, if anything, do we really know about those 5 days?
We don't, and everybody has a chance to guess.
In the century and a half since, says Catherine Smith, curator of the Poe Museum in Richmond, Virginia, historians and doctors have offered plenty of theories. Rabies, epilepsy, a diabetic coma, a beating from a band of hooligans.
And just plain mystery. Plain mystery.
Where was Poe between midnight on September the 26th and the afternoon of October the 3rd? Where was he?
While writing 2 books about Poe, that mystery kept haunting author John Evangelist Walsh. In his new book, Midnight Dreary, Walsh is the latest to claim that he's finally cracked the case.
And I thought, here's the answer, and you'll see what I mean.
Edgar Allan Poe was at the peak of his fame in 1849 when he returned to Richmond, Virginia, the city where he'd been raised.
When he got here in 1849, Poe was probably the best-known poet in America, and that was because of the publication of The Raven.
Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore.
Though he was paid a mere $11 for the poem, The Raven became an international sensation.
Quoth the raven, nevermore. That bird is the inevitability of death, and it won't go away.
Poe was just 40 years old as he arrived in Richmond, and a widower for more than 2 years, when he visited the home of Elmira Shelton, a former teenage sweetheart he'd once hoped to marry before her parents broke up the engagement.
Elmira Shelton was Edgar Allan Poe's first love. Elmira was living here as a widow when Poe came back in 1849, and this is where he came to court her.
Elmira Shelton's beauty, we're assured, is not captured in the old photographs, but Poe may also have been attracted to her wealth.
She was worth at least $100,000. That's a lot of money in 1849. And the whole thing just flared up again very easily. So it didn't take long. A couple of weeks, they were engaged.
But first, Poe had some business he needed to attend to in Philadelphia and New York.
This is the original trunk that Poe took with him when he left here the last night that anybody saw him in Richmond. It used to be leather, pretty nice leather too, but it's all gone now. But the hands of Edgar Allan Poe was all over this.
On the evening of September 26, 1849, Poe said goodbye to Elmira Shelton here at her doorstep. He had plans to catch an early morning boat to Baltimore. As she watched him walk down the steps and into the night, Elmira had no way of knowing that she'd never see Poe again.
Witnesses saw Poe head down to Rocket's Landing along the James River.
He came down here at about 5:30 in the morning to go aboard a boat that looked very much like this one behind us here. And that's, of course, where he disappears.
The boat would have brought him to Baltimore Harbor, but even Poe himself couldn't explain where he'd been when he was finally found more than 5 days later.
And he turned up in this very neighborhood here, and he was found in a bar, completely drunk, sitting
wearing somebody else's tattered clothes. Poe's condition was so poor that he was quickly taken to the Washington College Hospital,
where he was mostly hallucinating and was incoherent for 4 days.
Violent delirium, the doctor called it in a letter to Poe's aunt. Early on the 4th day, the doctor said, Poe suddenly uttered these words:
"Lord, help my poor soul." And then he died.
This announcement, coming so sudden and unexpected, the Baltimore Sun reported, will cause poignant regret among all who admire genius and have sympathy for the frailties too often attending it. After a search, Poe's trunk did turn up in the storage room of a Baltimore hotel.
What was in it provided no clue at all.
But the key to the case, Walsh believes, can be found back in Richmond with the woman Poe left behind.
What did Elmira Shelton's family think of this relationship?
They were all against the marriage. They did not
Elmira
want
Shelton had 3 brothers.
And those are the ones who eventually caused Poe's death. They didn't murder him.
But Walsh believes they did follow him to the boat in Richmond and on to Baltimore.
They told him to go on to New York, don't come back, and never be in touch with their sister again. Mm-hmm. They did it because they wanted to prevent him from marrying their sister. You know the reputation Poe had.
Poe was no saint, let's just face it. His problems, according to some people, he was a womanizer, and to others, he was an alcoholic.
Before leaving Richmond, Poe had taken a temperance pledge, swearing never to touch liquor again.
And by the way, it was in all the newspapers. The fact that Poe took a pledge was in all the newspapers.
Did Elmira's brothers try to chase Poe away and then get him drunk to embarrass him? Walsh believes that's just what they did.
Anybody want to disagree with that solution?
Well, quite a few people, as it turns out. The Poe Museum's Catherine Smith.
I think it's an interesting theory. I don't know that I would agree wholeheartedly with it, but then I haven't agreed wholeheartedly with any of them.
But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word.
Actor John Astin.
I don't think I've heard a theory that I think is really the answer. Then the bird said, "Nevermore."
So you think this is a debate that will just never die?
Oh, I think after all this time, no, it won't. And that's the mystery of Poe.
A century and a half later, we are still tapping at the door, trying to unlock the mystery of Poe's disappearance. How strange that the creator of the detective story, in his death, left us without a clue.
And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore.
This hillside home near Palm Springs doesn't look much like a haunted house. But Lon Chaney always looks forward to getting it ready for Halloween. He is, after all, a descendant of monsters. His great-grandfather was the Phantom of the Opera and the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Silent film star Lon Chaney. And his grandfather was the Wolfman, Lon Chaney Jr. So on Halloween, Lon Chaney pulls all the family skeletons out of the closet.
You're going to run into some vampires, you're going to run into some phantoms and wolfmen, mummies, Frankensteins. Chaney's played them all, and they're all here for Halloween.
Somehow, the old monsters from the days of black and white still have a stranglehold on our imagination. No matter how many attempts have been made to kill them off, they just keep coming back. And these undead creatures have bestowed an immortality of sorts on the actors who played them so long ago.
I am Dracula.
Bela Lugosi as Dracula. Boris Karloff as Frankenstein's monster. Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman.
He was just Gramps to us. He wasn't the Wolfman or a movie star.
But Gramps was always the Wolfman when Halloween rolled around.
Well, the kids loved to come to his house. They'd have him howl for him like the Wolfman howled. He did it all night long, God bless him.
Having a monster in the family can add a lot to your Halloween memorabilia.
It's mainly here in the Bathing with Boris bathroom, and when we have parties, you'd be amazed at how many people we lose in the bathroom.
Sarah Karloff is the daughter of Boris Karloff and says her father saw it as his good fortune to become famous as a monster.
He's one of the owners of Halloween. He always referred to it as his busy season.
But that didn't mean their door was busy with trick-or-treaters.
At home, it was quieter at our house than at yours because people were afraid to ring the doorbell.
The brain of a dead man, waiting to live again in a body I made with my own hands.
Who wouldn't be afraid of the monster created by Dr. Frankenstein? When the film was made 75 years ago, it was widely seen as the scariest movie ever. So scary, it began with a warning.
So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now is your chance to, well, we've warned you.
Nobody anticipated the film to be the success that it was. My father wasn't even invited to the premiere.
You might say Frankenstein was a roaring success. So Universal Studios quickly followed with another monster.
Good night, Mr. Renfield.
Bela Lugosi, a Hungarian immigrant who could barely speak English, took the role of Dracula.
To die, to be really dead, that must be glorious.
He set the pattern for every vampire to follow, says director John Landis.
To this day, Dracula does what Bela Lugosi did, and they talk like Dracula. They talk like him. Kind of, you know, it's sad in many ways, kind of ruined his career. And in other ways, it's wonderful because who else has that kind of impact on the culture?
Together, Dracula and Frankenstein proved that movie audiences love to be frightened.
It's very much like, you know, you look at parents with their children, what do? They immediately go, whoops, and they throw them in the air. Look, I'm gone. I'm back. I'm gone. I mean, what's more terrifying to a child? I'm gone. You know, I mean, it's, people torment their kids. I mean, it's a strange but very human thing.
Landis knows how to frighten. He wrote and directed the 1981 hit, An American Werewolf in London. That movie caught Michael Jackson's attention, and he hired Landis to direct the video for Thriller. In his horror films, Landis got plenty of inspiration from the early monster movies. And he is one of the contributors to a new book celebrating Universal Studios' classic monsters, beginning with The Phantom of the Opera. The chilling face was Lon Chaney's own creation. He did his own makeup, says great-grandson Ron Chaney.
And he was a perfectionist, and it was very important that when he played that role, that it did come across that way, that it did scare people, to the fact that he wouldn't let him show his face until the movie screen. All of the lobby cards, no photographs of his face.
Thought it would scare people too much?
Well, he said, why would I allow people to photograph me? It's going to take all the surprise out of the film when they see it, and thank God they did, because it just horrified people.
What has kept these creatures alive, says John Landis, is that in them we still see ourselves and our fears.
I mean, Frankenstein could not be more contemporary. Mary Shelley wrote a book about a doctor, Victor Frankenstein, who is interested in creating life. He builds a cadaver from pieces of dead people, corpses, and reanimates it.
Now I know what it feels like to be God.
It has to do with there are some things man is not meant to know. like genetics or DNA. These are God's property, and you don't fool around with God. I mean, the Frankenstein monster could not be more contemporary.
And what the werewolf goes through is familiar in a way to most of us.
I mean, puberty, all these weird things are happening to our body. Hair is suddenly sprouting from our face and other places. I mean, all humans, go through this metamorphosis.
As terrifying as they may be, these classic movie monsters are also strangely sympathetic.
Lon Chaney Jr.'s character, what's his name, Larry Talbot. Larry is just a guy who's bitten by a werewolf, and he gets this disease. It's like cancer. And it's not him.
Ron Chaney agrees his grandfather's Wolfman was a victim.
They wanted to hate him, but they couldn't because it was something that was put upon them that they really couldn't help. And I truly believe that's what's made it last for so long and why people still enjoy the films to this day.
Will you play with me?
Even Frankenstein's terrible creation had a softer side. One Sarah Karloff says was much more like her father, Boris.
My father was very well educated and very well read as an individual. And he understood that the plight of the monster, that he really was the victim and not the perpetrator. And he understood abandonment, and he understood the responsibility of Victor Frankenstein for his own creation.
But Dracula is evil. I mean, he is satanic.
But that has never taken a bite out of his popularity.
Did you know that Dracula is the #1 filmed character? More movies made around the world about Dracula than any other character.
So once again, it's the season when these monsters are busy making us all face our fears about life and death, love and rejection. And no matter how it turned out for them in the movies, Lon and Bela and Boris remain more loved than feared.
They were all wonderful actors, and when you make something that lasts for so long, I think you've done your job and you've done it well.
Halloween, in a time of COVID, is forcing folks to come up with some unique celebrations, as Luke Burbank has discovered.
Halloween is just around the corner, but like so many things these days, you've got to get creative if you want to have a spooky but safe time. From socially distant candy contraptions
Happy Halloween!
to costumes that keep kids spread out, to maybe the most 2020 thing you'll see. The drive-thru haunted house. All across America, from LA to New Jersey, people are lining up by the carful to get freaked out.
I was home one night and I saw my kids and they'd be watching TV and nothing really to do.
Johnny Moranti owns a car wash in Copeg, New York.
So I said to myself, what can I do to bring a little joy to some younger children, and adults for that matter? And that's what inspired me to do the Tunnel of Terror.
And people have been waiting for hours just to get in. For $25, they get their car washed and they get menaced by Moranti's employees, dressed as characters sure to haunt any kid's nightscape for years to come. Meanwhile, in Portland, Oregon, things were getting messier for folks visiting the Oaks Park Haunted Drive-Thru, where customers can choose from one of 5 experiences, ranked from 0 to 5 skulls based on how scary they are.
Is it a challenge to scare people when they're in the relative safety of their car?
Yes. That has been the main concern is how do we make it scary with that barrier.
Alex Fulmore is one of the owners of Scaregrounds PDX, who put this attraction together. One thing he didn't expect, people were actually getting too scared when the creepy characters were wandering up to their cars in line for the event.
For some reason, the menacing characters, it's just like you're sitting in your car and you see this, you know, you're not quite sure if they're with us, you're not quite sure if they've just wandered out of the woods.
This feels like a moment in time where if an actual Michael Myers just wandered, you know, down the street, you might be like, oh, that's 2020 for you.
Exactly.
You know?
As night fell, I was ready to drive through one of the experiences. But I wouldn't be doing it alone. I'd brought along my actual nephews, Jack and Abe, for protection.
Are you guys scared right now? What is your feeling?
Kind of. I don't know what it's going to be like. I've never been to a haunted house. I don't know if there's like a certain level that this one might be of scariness.
Yeah.
We'd chosen an experience rated 4 skulls, meaning really scary.
And let's see what this one says. This one is
Condemned.
The Condemned.
Oh, God.
Once inside, we were given a Bluetooth speaker so we could hear the terrifying characters. Oh no! As they tried to claw their way into our vehicle.
Should I unlock the doors?
No!
Oh no, look at it, he got caught in the circuit breaker. And then, just like that, it was over.
Scene complete. Please start your vehicle.
How was it?
That was awesome.
Yeah?
Like, probably the best, like, Halloween thing ever.
Even though we had to be in the car, it was still scary?
Yeah.
We'd survived. I'd even had a pretty good time being scared out of our wits. But for me, the real nightmare was just beginning. Trying to explain this to the people at the rental car place.
We leave you this Sunday morning in the company of gray bats, not in a belfry, but in a cave near Park City, Kentucky.